The forest has always held a certain allure for me. Its beauty and mystery beckoned me to explore its depths, and I often found solace in its tranquil embrace. But one fateful day, my love for the woods turned into a terrifying ordeal that would forever change my perception of nature. It was a warm summer afternoon when I decided to venture into a nearby forest. Armed with a backpack filled with essentials and a sense of adventure, I set off on a hike. The sun filtered through the canopy, casting dappled shadows on the forest floor, and the air was filled with the sweet scent of pine. I followed the well-marked trails for hours, enjoying the solitude and immersing myself in the beauty of nature. But as the day wore on, I realized that I had strayed from the main trail. Panic began to set in as I tried to retrace my footsteps, but all I encountered were unfamiliar trees and a growing sense of unease. With each passing moment, the forest seemed to transform. The once inviting and familiar surroundings became a labyrinth of twisted branches and foreboding shadows. The sun began to set, casting an eerie gloom over the landscape. I quickened my pace, hoping to stumble upon a familiar landmark or a fellow hiker who could point me in the right direction. But the forest seemed determined to keep me captive. The trees shifted and whispered, their branches reaching out as if to grab a hold of me. The wind howled, carrying with it an unsettling sense of isolation. As darkness enveloped the woods, my fear intensified. The sounds of nocturnal creatures echoed through the trees, their calls becoming distorted and ominous. Every rustle of leaves and crack of twigs set my heart racing, my imagination conjuring images of unseen horrors lurking just out of sight. I tried to calm myself, reminding myself that I had basic survival skills and the necessary equipment. I set up a makeshift camp, lit a small fire and huddled close, seeking warmth and comfort amidst the encroaching darkness. But the night brought no respite. Shadows danced and flickered, creating sinister shapes that seemed to taunt me. I could feel eyes watching me from the depths of the forest, an unseen presence that sent chills down my spine. The sleep eluded me that night. I sat wide-eyed and my senses heightened, listening to every distant sound and imagining the worst. The forest seemed to have a life of its own, and I was just a small and vulnerable intruder in its domain. The following morning brought a glimmer of hope as the first rays of sunlight pierced through the dense canopy. Determined to find my way back, I gathered my belongings and embarked on what felt like an endless journey through the woods. As I continued to navigate the labyrinthine forest, hunger gnawed at my stomach, exhaustion weighed heavy on my limbs, and desperation threatened to consume me. The forest was unyielding, offering no clear path to escape. Just when I was on the verge of giving up, I heard the distant hum of an engine. With renewed vigor, I followed the sound and emerged from the forest, stumbling upon a remote road. Relief washed over me as a passing motorist stopped to offer assistance. The experience left an indelible mark on me. The forest, once a symbol of serenity and tranquility, had revealed its dark side. It taught me the importance of preparedness and respecting the untamed wilderness. It reminded me that in the midst of nature's beauty, there existed a power that can humble even the most intrepid explorers. Though I still venture into the woods, I do so with caution and reverence, forever mindful of the true nature of the wilderness that lies just beyond our door. I love waking up in the dark and walking the sunrise with my dogs. I didn't intend to own 2 huskies and a German Shepherd mix, but they each found me and I couldn't turn them away. We usually jog about 5 miles daily, often in the neighborhood. But nearly as often I load us up in the van and drive 10 minutes to the wooded Metro Park. I love it there. They offer some trails that allow quads and motorbikes and some bicycles and skis. Some just people. And last year they opened a new one that allows pets. It's a 5-mile loop into the area farthest from the city. We live on the northern edge of town, but in the dark with no leaves in the trees, you can clearly see the red glow of the CVS sign for most of the hike. These are tamed woods with asphalt paths and concrete fire pits, and rangers patrolling normally. And the hospital behind CVS means that there's emergency medical care within walking distance. I was up coughing again in the night. I had a serious case of pneumonia 2 months ago and was not fully recovered when this sinus infection hit me. I'm past the fever part, so we're walking, not yet jogging again. But after being up in the night, I didn't get up in time to go walk before I dropped my kids off at school. And then my youngest had an appointment, and then I had to run a few errands. And then we had unexpected visitors right after school. And then they stayed for dinner. And finally, I got the dogs into the van and we made it to the park just before it started to get dark. I was irritated at all the little things that kept me from my walk all day. But as we drove all the way to the back of the park, I realized that we would be walking the sunset, watching it over the lake and the hills and through the bare trees. And the park was clearing out now. As it started towards dark, we would very nearly have the place to ourselves, and might not have to pull off the path to let others pass us. An amazing number of people who are afraid of dogs hike the pet path. All those little irritations that led up to the singular moment of beauty I would not otherwise have seen and appreciated. This was going to be a really good walk. And it's funny how life works out when you let it. I parked in my spot at the farthest end of the parking lot by the bathrooms. A mile-long, people, walkers or joggers only path looped through the woods, and by the lake came out by the bathrooms. I like to run it when I came here alone. It was a glorious walk through a Bob Ross painting. My mind cleared and my thoughts quieted, and I simply experienced the woods, my feet on the path, my dogs panting, the nature sounds, the beauty of the sky. I absolutely loved it. About halfway now in the city sounds had faded away until I could only hear the birds and frogs, and insects all singing their songs of territory, and mating, and life. And then a crack. Utter silence and absolute stillness. My dogs and I turned instantly towards the source of the sound and froze. Behind us and to the right, the sound had come from the crest of a hill. I could see nothing and heard only the dogs panting. I waited for the nature sounds to return. They did not. All three of the dogs slowly raised their ruffs, first standing on end, all of their shoulders and necks, tails held tall and proud, making themselves look larger and more threatening. I took a step towards them, and the female husky, the leader of my little pack, instantly put her ears back and her head down and pulled me down the path. All three of them left their tails and ruffs up, but the two males also put their ears back and heads down and began to pull me, so off we went. The woods were still silent. We must have startled a buck on the slope of the hill, not seen him, and after we had passed, he leapt up the hill and jumped a dead tree, and his hoof hit a dead branch and the branch broke, and heard that cracking sound and scared everyone. But why were the woods still silent? Maybe there's something up there. Homeless people must stay here sometimes. The bathrooms have heat so the pipes don't freeze. But this is about as far out as the path goes. It would be a good place to sleep. Maybe he's setting up a shelter and broke a branch. But why were the woods still silent? We were about as far from the city as we could get in these woods, and you couldn't see the CVS sign, or the glow from streetlights, or even hear the traffic noises. It was dark and still, and absolutely quiet except for the panting dogs and 4 sets of footsteps on the path. I wanted to run. The dogs wanted to run. Bigfoot. There was a Bigfoot breaking a log to say, "Get out." There are no Bigfoot in city limits, I promise you that. Brain, come on, it was a deer. The woods are still quiet because of us. I have 200 pounds of dog here. Yes, they're the big huskies. And another 200 pounds of me. Yeah, I'm a little fat, but I've got good muscle underneath. I have broad shoulders that don't fit into women's shirts and big hands that don't fit into women's gloves. I can lift 100 pounds over my head. We are the scariest thing in these woods. There's no bear, there's no wolves, there's no Bigfoot. There are deer and there are foxes, and there might be an angry raccoon, but we are the biggest, baddest, scariest thing in these woods. Unless there's someone with a gun. Shut up, you're not helping. The dogs had not stopped once to sniff or mark. Heads down, ears back, tails and ruffs still held high. They just wanted to go. We had gone almost a mile now, me craning my head the whole time, trying to see as far as I could in all directions while letting the dogs pull me down the path. And it was still absolutely silent. Not an overflying goose, not a cricket. Nothing moved. Nothing made a sound. Except us. Here came the third and longest of the 3 steep hills on this trail. I had been running these to rebuild my strength and endurance, but if I ran this, I would be blown at the top. The top where it curved around as it crested and you couldn't see anything past the thick trees. The top where, if you were deeper in the woods, you could follow a more gradual ridge up to the crest of the hill and wait, unseen, for someone to come up the path. Ambush. It was a deer. Turn around. It was just a deer. What if it's behind us? Ambush, deer, gun, Bigfoot. This is why I run. The noise in my head is unbearable otherwise. Up the hill, walk, pay attention, watch the dogs. The dogs were still on high alert, but they didn't hesitate to go up the hill. In fact, they wanted to go faster. Just don't walk, don't get smoked. Be able to run or fight if you have to. Yeah, okay, I'm scared too. The woods should not still be silent. The dogs should not still be on alert. It's not a cat or a bear or a wolf, and I really doubt it's Bigfoot. But it could be a person, so let's be smart. Just walk. We are not good prey. The dogs will protect me. The huskies might not alone, but the shepherd will, and they'll follow his lead. Be smart and get out. Only another mile now to the lake and the first parking lot, and then another half-mile along the way to the second lot where my van was. Hearing traffic noises now, but still no birds, no crickets, no frogs. The smell almost stopped me in my tracks, but the dogs kept pulling. Sour and grassy and oddly metallic, and crap. Crap and blood and partially digested grass. I smelled the contents of a deer's stomach. Someone hunted these woods, and the dogs were not at all interested in the smell. We ran. I don't remember much of that last mile, we just ran. Desna, the big female husky, finally stopped to drink some lake water as we came out by the parking lot, and then she began to sniff and pee. The boys followed her lead. There is a single truck parked. I relaxed quite a bit, but still I felt on edge. Down the lake at the next parking lot, I could see headlights. They must be parked at the turnaround at the end of the lot closest to the lake. Their headlights illuminated the lakeside path. They're watching us. I'm halfway to the van now, and the car drove away. 20 feet from the van, and I heard a motor coming down the nearest path. I decided to put the dogs in the car on the driver's side instead of the passenger side like normal. The sound of the motor came closer. The leashes caught on the armrest, and I had to untangle them before the dogs could jump into the van. The motor came closer down the path. I had to be gone before it came out. I knew it with an absolute certainty. Finally, the dogs were in. I slammed the door and I jumped in the front, fumbling for the lock button, shaking hands and clipping the keys from my jogging belt, starting the car and gunning it into reverse. And as my headlights swept over the entrance of the path were the bathrooms, they lit up a four-wheeler coming out of the woods. I was dropping the transmission into drive and hitting the gas, and as my brain processed what my eyes saw, it informed me that there was something across the handlebars. A gun, a deer carcass. I couldn't tell, and because of the angle when pulling away, I couldn't see him in the rearview mirror at all. It was late at night. I'm not sure of the exact time, but I'm going to guess around midnight. And for some reason, my best friend, Lainey, and I decided to go for a walk. I really can't remember why. Probably to go to the 24-hour pharmacy to get drinks, or maybe just pass the time since there's really nothing to do at that time of night. And she was staying at my house for a few weeks. But we did. We were walking up my street in the direction of wherever we were going. We got decently far up and everything seemed fine. I didn't have a purse on me or anything, but Lainey did. So when we saw a man wearing baggy pants and a bright red hoodie, with the hood up and a hand in his pocket walking towards us, we went single file to one side of the sidewalk, and I went first, as we didn't want the one with valuables to be in front. Once we got past him, Lainey told me that she had a bit of a bad feeling. She turned back to look at him and I looked at her, and I could clearly see that she didn't look happy, and so I looked back too. And just as I did, I watched him stop walking as well. He mirrored our actions and turned to look at us, and he stared in our direction. A few seconds passed of us just staring at each other, and so Lainey and I broke the moment as we turned and kept walking the way we were. She said that she still had that bad feeling after a few steps, so we both turned our heads back again, and he was now walking in our direction. There were, if I remember correctly, maybe 5 meters between us, and the second we realized he was walking, we turned to keep going as well. Thankfully, we were near an intersection. When we got to it, we turned to check again, and sure enough, he was still coming our way. So we turned right onto Apple Street. We went up it for a bit and checked again, and you guessed it, he was still following us. So we kept going up Apple and crossed the street halfway up to a stop at a Burger King. It was closed since it was so late, but the lights around implying that there were workers inside cleaning and closing up, and there were 2 cars in the parking lot. We felt like we could just wait it out there, as people were around, and so that was what we decided to do. Once we got to the Burger King parking lot, we looked back and he was cutting diagonally up this field space towards us. We went to the opposite side of the BK, and now we were on a different street, called Orange, and went up it to the right, the direction that we were going on Apple. We got to the top of the street and looked back, and nobody was there. So we turned right onto the street that connects Apple and Orange, called Banana. We went along it towards Apple and then back down Apple towards where we came from originally. We got a bit down it and Lainey said that she had that bad feeling again. We look around and he's standing on the corner of Banana and Apple. We run back down Apple to BK and look back once more, once we get there. It looks like he's going further up on Apple, and therefore away from us. Which is clearly good, but we don't feel safe enough to go home yet, so we stayed there for about 20 minutes. During this time, this is irrelevant to the story, but it still upsets me to this day. A car pulled up to us and asked if we were okay, because I guess we looked clearly shaken. Lainey said yes, but the man was following us and we didn't know what to do. The guy in the car looked around and didn't see anyone, and said to call the police then, before promptly driving off. No, yeah, let's just call the police. There's a strange man following us, but he's been gone for 15 minutes now. No, he never harmed us. Yeah, he stayed about 5 to 10 meters behind us the whole time. No, he never even talked to us. I would tell them. They'll sure treat that as a top priority and send people out straight away. Anyway, after a little longer, we felt like it was about time to head back home since he didn't seem to be returning. We were standing in the BK parking lot closest to Orange Street, and we were just doing our double checks around to make sure that he was gone. Lainey was looking towards Apple and I was looking towards Orange. The fear I felt in this moment is one that I can't describe. There is some big trees against the building on Orange side, and remember, it was dark out. And Lainey is not paying attention to Orange. Thank God I was. I see a figure slowly emerge down the street from the tree canopy. And they're wearing red, the only color that I can see, with their hood up and a hand being put back into their pocket. I don't even want to know what he had. I inhaled sharply and immediately grabbed Lainey's arm on instinct and yanked her as hard as I could as I charged off towards Apple Street. The adrenaline made me forget the exact, finite details of every movement in this moment, so I don't know for sure if she protested or not. All I know is that I was pulling her towards Apple Street as hard as I could, and to this day, I say it's a true testament of how much I care for her, since she knows in situations like this, people can leave others behind to save themselves. And honestly, I know my care for her is what made me react that way because I'm the type of person to freeze in fear, unless someone I care about is in danger as well. The figure went all the way up Apple to the next block, turned left to the connecting street between Apple and Orange, not Banana as it's a new block now, and came back down it again. The drive-thru Burger King is on the Apple side. I yank her over there and throw her with me against the drive-thru wall, as it's at an angle that gave us cover from him going down Orange. We pressed against the wall, waited a little, and then peeked around the corner and he was just going past a building down Orange. Until then, I lost sight of him. We were panicking very badly now. We waited a little longer, maybe 5 minutes, and then decided to check if he was gone again. Lainey didn't want to move in case he started coming towards us on Apple, and when you go to Orange, buildings block your view of it, so she stayed there while I went over to Orange. I looked up it and down it, and he was nowhere. Relieved, I turned to start walking back towards Lainey, but as I turned to do so, I caught sight of him. He was coming straight for me, diagonally and through the field between Apple and Orange's buildings, just like he had when we got to BK the first time. He was about 15 to 20 meters away. Frozen, I turned to Lainey fully. She was far from me but was close enough to see my expression, and I could see hers. I pointed frantically in his direction, and she looked confused but scared, which told me that she hadn't noticed him. I was mouthing, "It's him," but she only looked more confused, so I could tell she wasn't reading my lips properly, probably due to the distance. In panic, with no other conceivable option, I started running towards her and waving her over. Complying, she started running to me. As she did, she noticed him and ran faster. We met in the middle of the parking lot. By this point, he was very close to us, and the 2 cars in the parking lot were still there. As one faces the cars from our current position, on the left, there was a man in his, and on the right, there was a parking space between the 2 cars, where 2 teen boys were in theirs. We darted to and around the teen boy's car as it was closest and sat in front of it, our legs under to shield ourselves as much as possible. By this point, I was visibly shaking, and Lainey was full-on crying, like sob crying. She was trying to keep quiet, but you could tell even from inside the car that we were in trouble. And I knew the boys noticed because they looked at us in shock and then behind them to see what we were looking at, and just stared at the man, immobile. Now as we're sitting in front of the car, we can't see him because he's adjacent to us with the car blocking our vision. I'm sitting on the left while she's sitting on the right, so she's on the side that he would emerge from when he entered her view. I couldn't see him unless I went around the car or sat up, while she could just peek to the side. Which he did as he kept going to Orange, which made her shove herself into me in an attempt to get out of his view once she saw him. Sadly, this block didn't pin me under the car a little, and I couldn't move as she was on my legs. We were trying to keep silent due to the fact that if he decided to look to his right, he could clearly see us. But she was crying harder now and I was trying to get her off of me so we could dart to the man's car. Eventually, she got the message, after the initial fear and shock of seeing him that froze her in place wore off. So she sat back so I could move, and we ran to the far side of the man's car. During all of this, by the way, all 3 people in their cars were looking from us, to the guy, to us, and to the guy, doing absolutely nothing. Not even asking if we were okay or showing any emotion other than vague curiosity. as two 17 to 18-year-old girls are sobbing and shaking, and literally doing Mission Impossible shit around some cars in the dead of night, with a hooded figure in view, only a few meters away. I'll never forgive those people, and it's why I still think we were technically in danger. Because if the man decided to turn and charge at us, there's nothing we could have done. And I strongly doubt the boys or the man in the cars would have done anything either. We sat there for a little, peeking over the top of the car, until the man turned and went up Orange towards Banana. As soon as we lost sight of him, we decided it was time to go, because clearly every time we thought he was gone, we were sorely mistaken. And so we shot up, went back down Apple, and booked it all the way home. We never saw him again and made a vow to never go out at night again. Never have, and I never will unless I have a male with me. And I picked up a pocket knife and a pin alarm. You pull out the pin and the device shrieks, only stopping when that specific pin is put back in, shortly thereafter. They're still in my purse and will never be taken out.